Namaste and welcome to the Bharatvaarta Weekly. I'm Roshan Karyappa. And as usual, I have our guests Abhishek Paul, Neerav Kanodra, and Prasanna Vishwanathan joining you on this weekly to give you news and perspectives on the week that was. So, hey everyone, thanks so much for joining, and we have plenty to discuss. We'll be talking about the Singapore Prime Minister's remarks on India and her politicians. Of course, there was a bit of controversy on the Punjab's Chief Minister's remark on migrants. And then there is this ensuing controversy with the historian Vikram Sampath and some of his other peers. Then the Russia-Ukraine crisis continues, and there are some remarks by President Biden of the US as well on that front. And in more positive news, we have Nepal, which has become the first country outside of India to adopt UPI. So this is going to be a power-packed session. So stay tuned for all of the news and views. As usual, let's start with the episode that we put out last week. We had a live stream with Rohit Jayaraman, who's a resident political expert, and Nimish Joshi. And this was a fascinating session. I mean, the Punjab, UP, Uttarakhand, and Goa elections are, ongoing, upcoming, and plenty of nuances there, right? So, Abhishek, what do you think about the live stream?
Yeah, I listened to, I think, till it got disconnected, right? So I hope the new episode is put out fully. But I think uh, Punjab and Uttarakhand partly was discussed, right? And it was really fascinating to hear Rohit's insights on Punjab, especially. So I think uh, the various factors contributing to the current political situation, including the relatively strong position that AAP is in right now, was well highlighted. And also on Uttarakhand, he was, I think, really interesting insights on the demographics in the state in terms of the difference between the plains and the hills. Right, was very well explained.
Yeah, yeah. No, that was an interesting point for sure. Or I do catch that episode. We're going to put an edited video out shortly, maybe today or tomorrow. And do check out that episode if you haven't tuned into the live stream already. Moving on to the first piece of news for this week. India has complained to Singapore about a remark its prime minister made on the number of Indian MPs. The prime minister Lee Hsien Loong stated, Nehru's India has become one where almost half the MPs in the Lok Sabha have criminal charges pending against them. He also referred to a dilution of democratic ideals in India under Nehru to what it is today. India's main opposition, Congress party, led by Nehru's great-grandson Rahul Gandhi, took the opportunity to extol its old leader and have a dig at its rivals. Neerav, as the resident Singaporean on the panel, what do you make of this?
So actually, we need to see in what context was this remark made. So the background is that there is one MP from an opposition party. So Lee Hsien Loong, the Prime Minister, is from the People's Action Party, and the opposition party, Workers' Party, has one MP who has made or is accused of making a white lie in the Parliament. That she mentioned she was at a place with someone where she wasn't actually present, right? So this is the context, and the ruling party is kind of raising this as an issue about like the ethics of this particular MP, or why hasn't she been dismissed by the leader of the opposition, etc. Right? So it is in that context where they're saying that the parliament should have the highest ethical standards, and even like a trivial white lie should not be kind of go unpunished. And in that context, he is referred to, say, India, where a lot of the members of the parliament have criminal charges against them, right? But like, see, he's not trying to interfere anything in India. And put another thing in context, like Singapore got independence from Britain in 63, where it was a part of Malaysia, and then became fully independent in 65. And at that time, Nehru was the Prime Minister of India from 1947 onwards. And India being one of the first country under the British Raj which had taken independence, these leaders, where the Prime Minister was a teenager, did look up to India for like their democratic progression and then continuous democracy, right? So I think that was one of the aspects. Second thing is, as we do know that even in Nehru's parliament, a lot of the MPs had gone to prison under the British government, right? Or in later on in 1975, in the emergency, a lot of the non-Congress politicians were put in prison by our Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, right? So a lot of politicians have been to prison. A lot of times when somebody becomes successful, the other parties put criminal charges against them. So they've been accused, right? But they may not be actually complicit. So there is a very different context, very different thing. And finally, I would say, like, see, Singapore has been an ally of India more strongly since the 1990s. After India's liberalization, we have a trade agreement with Singapore, which is a CECA, Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement. And we've had, government is alluding to, is if we kind of tolerate these kind of white lies, maybe we go down the path where like India has underperformed economically versus potential, right? I don't know what is he thinking, but we need to take this into context. I would say it's not that Singapore is looking to support any one party or another. And Singapore itself has a law which prohibits foreign interference in its own politics, right? So same thing, like India wants to look at Singapore as an ally, regardless who's in power. Singapore looks at India as an ally, regardless who's in power. So I think that's what it is. Probably our Jai Shankar, our External Affairs Minister, and the External Affairs Ministry has kind of seek some clarification. Hopefully this is just taken off as a misunderstanding and we move on. We have a lot of Indian citizens who live in Singapore and a lot of Indian OCIs and like people of Indian origin, Indian ethnicity who are living in Singapore. So it's a friendly nation, and I would say don't attribute to like malice wherever, you know, you could say like this was taken out of context or yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, I
possibly
agree with Meera. Only one point that I would like to make, like especially the section of the Indian commentariat which latched on to what the the Singapore president said. See, let's look at the the class composition and the social composition of the parliament, the first Lok Sabha versus the class and the social composition of the current Lok Sabha, or probably for the last 2 decades, the composition of the Lok Sabha. Certainly the Indian democracy, right, at the beginning of, during the independence and maybe at least 10-15 decades post the independence, was a very elitist endeavor actually. While if you really compare the, especially based on the demographic compositions of the last 3-4 Lok Sabhas, you could look at it 2 ways. Like, see, this is actually a point that the same set of people who have latched on to Singapore president's remarks are the ones who made this point, but surprisingly, that this nuance doesn't come out now. Is like, the current composition was celebrated as a deepening and strengthening of the Indian democracy, where you had the subaltern forces coming into the fore of the Indian democracy. And, this is more an attribute, and any kind of comparison to those quote unquote, the parliament dominated by the founding fathers, a term that I'm deeply, find it offensive and uncomfortable. I mean, that is like, was supposed to be because it was a very elitist, political framework at that time, so it's I think, like, I would think that maybe the Singapore president would have done well not to, wade into this controversy, because, I think the nuance is also very critical, especially when you're making the cross-country comparison. And the last thing is that, this entire criminal, see, of course, I'm sure there are like a few members who also face very serious criminal charges, but a lot of these quote-unquote criminal charges are like basically participation in political programs. Like you are in opposition in a particular state, you fight as a part of a movement or something like that, you are charged with criminal trespass, arson, all that stuff, which is not something, probably a kind of managed democracy like Singapore permits. So, it's I think going down a very, I think generally as as a friendly nation, and which kind of hosts a lot of high quality human capital, and we have like very deep business relationship. I think this kind of cross comparisons, maybe he made it in a particular context, but in a highly politicized and polarized political environment that prevails in a country like India, it's sure to be picked up by forces with vested interest. Actually, I think this nuance never comes out in the debate.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it betrays a sense of naivety, right? I mean, what does it take to file an FIR in India, really? And
No, so absolutely.
so,
Exactly.
yeah.
The thing is, he spoke in a particular context, in a particular setting, right? And then, like any statement taken out of context for some other thing can be blown up. Like India is so politically polarized that everybody wants to comfortably say, "Oh, see, look at this." Even if they are the party, say for example, who has like a larger percentage of people with criminal records or criminal cases against them. So that's what it is. I think like, yeah, India, all the people are like democratically elected in a free, fair, transparent manner, as in, so our elections are at least not tainted. It's unfortunate if the people do want someone who has either a criminal record or has cases against them, then they do win. And second thing is like, say leaders like Lalu Prasad Yadav, who has had a lot of cases, it has been barred, right? As there is a process that that they cannot stand in elections. So there is a process for that. So that is also being taken care of, right? So that's what it is.
Yeah, I am so conflicted actually. I want Minister Jaishankar to respond and at the same time not respond also, right? I mean, if he responds, we'll have that 30-second or 40-second zinger, right? A very nice clip that does the rounds on Twitter and so on, right? And also at the same time, I think it's too minor for like to merit a proper response, really. But one thing is that internationally, I think everyone prefers a more docile India versus a sort of a strident India, right? I mean, I don't think anybody would have taken much notice of this maybe 10-15 years back, right? So
yeah.
All right, moving on. The Punjab Chief Minister Charanjit Channi is in hot water after making a comment regarding migrants from neighboring states. During a rally for his upcoming elections, the current Chief Minister of Punjab asked his people not let the, to quote, Bhaiyas of Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, and Delhi rule the state. The video went viral with Priyanka Gandhi Vadra seen beside Channi clapping when he made these remarks. The comment has drawn sharp criticism from both AAP and BJP. Mr. Channi then issued a clarification and claimed that his statement was being misconstrued. He also claimed that these remarks were aimed at the leadership of AAP. Abhishek, this is not perhaps the first time that this sentiment has surfaced, right? I mean, so what do you think about this?
Yes, so I think this sentiment of looking at it is quite popular in, I would say, almost all states which are not in the Hindi heartland, right? So you can go state by state almost and you will see, right? So take the recent example of the Bengal elections, right? So this insider outsider game it's a pretty easy low hanging fruit that many political parties go to, and often then later on end up regretting as well, or because obviously these are not politically correct statements, right? So the fact that he had to sort of backtrack a little bit shows that whatever he said is not what he should have been saying, right? But these kind of statements are quite common, right? If going back in time also, you can look at Shiv Sena in the 90s or 70s, 80s, 90s. You can look at Trinamool Congress last 10 years. So I'm sure Prasanna can add examples from Tamil Nadu as well, right? So these kind of statements are, they do keep coming. I think people who actually do business, or in case of Punjab, do big agriculture, know the value of the migrants in their state. And I mean, many of these states are pretty much reliant on migrants coming and doing the bulk of labor, right? So their importance cannot be overstated actually. So yeah, it's pretty unfortunate. I think uh, political opponents of the Congress party took good advantage of it, starting from the prime minister, right? So I think he was rebutted well, and yeah, it's just one of those statements that will keep coming during election times, I feel.
I kind of, just want to add on. I think there are two issues here. One is, of course, we could always dismiss it as a election eve rhetoric. Okay, sometimes, like basically you kind of escalate the rhetoric in the run up to the election. But I think there is also a deeper structural problem in Punjab. So basically that, I mean, it was actually not even a dog whistle, which some of this other political parties that indulge in xenophobic nativism do, right? This was like quite blatant and brazen, call by the chief minister. See, I think it resonates in Punjab. I mean, it would be unfair to say that population of the entire state, but I think there is a significant section of population in Punjab where this kind of a supremacism or xenophobic exaltation does resonate. Channi being like a political operator maybe picks up this strand which is prevalent in Punjab, and my last point on is that we could just the popular culture is a good barometer of this kind of underlying sentiment in the society, right? Like say, for example, you would never see that kind of a popular culture what do you call production in terms of in popular music, in terms of cinema, drama, in terms of the social media, YouTube's, Instagrams, and all that. But this kind of casting the hardworking North Indian migrant labor as a as some kind of outsiders is quite dominant in the Punjab popular culture. Especially contrasting. In fact, I was frankly astonished when a lot of people, and some of them from Punjab, kind of highlighted the songs and dance where this kind of quote unquote some kind of a pseudo racist superiority is almost considered par for course in the popular discourse, which is quite unfortunate. And I hope that the good people there in that state seriously introspect. And as Abhishek said, I think this politicization, I don't think so. Anybody who was criticizing it or condemning this kind of a statement by Channi is, I mean, it's not politicization according to me. It's a problem which is far deeper. And last point on it is that I'm just little worried because maybe you saw Priyanka Gandhi who was standing next to him lustily cheering on as the chief minister made this remark. We need to see this kind of a public display of approval in conjunction with Congress's own recent ideological pivot, right? From Rahul Gandhi's tweet, just like trying to ride on some kind of an imagined Tamil exceptionalism as mainstream, I mean, which is not even true in the case of Tamil Nadu itself. I would still think that DMK winning political power doesn't essentially mean that the kind of ideology that they represent is mainstream even in the Tamil society, actually, or at least that's what I would like to believe. But the Congress's own recent ideological predilections and picking up somebody like Channi, who's probably like you could see the remarks of even the Congress's own people who are quitting the party in Punjab, right? Like he was just picked out of obscurity, picked out of nowhere, and catapulted as the CM, right? Actually, so whether it was just like one quote unquote a social justice card, or it was a part of a larger ideological pivot of the Congress party, something we need to really carefully watch out for as things unfold. Actually, so that's the point that I just wanted to.
I think
No, Rohit
Rohit
agrees.
made
Yeah,
a
yeah.
very good point. He said that
Yeah.
the Amrinder Congress was a very distinct flavor of Congress to the larger INC, which is at the national level. But now the national and the state party is in sync, basically.
Yeah.
Whatever that, I mean, their new federalism-based avatar is, or whatever.
No, that's actually, I mean, a recurring point that he makes, right? I mean, we did one podcast sometime back, I mean, maybe a year ago, on the future of the Indian National Congress. And even there too, I think Rohit made the point that Rahul Gandhi is actually very SJW, very, very left of, whatever people kind of consider him to be, right? And so this kind of ties into, his regular stuff, right? I mean, whatever he thinks and feels.
No, I think Roshan, actually, my impression, at least, like at least till a couple of years back, I think the Karnataka election was the wake-up call, in the sense that where probably for the first time, Congress kind of played that card, which kind of backfired largely. I think it was very poor strategy that happened in Karnataka. But I would still, I would still think that, if they have a left of center or even a left orientation in economic policies, right? Like say, I mean, which is what the traditional economic policy as well, like large scale redistribution, all that stuff. That is par for the course, right? Like in a country like India, certainly there will always be a sufficient constituency for a economic rhetoric of that nature, right? But I think like we are looking at something which is much more concerning and far serious. Is this? I think at least there was some minimum consensus among the national parties actually about the conception of the nationhood, whether
Yeah.
it's a constitutional nationhood, or whether it's a civilizational based state. I think that is like something which can be contested in the public debate, and I think that pendulum will also keep swinging based on how the political trajectory of the country is there at a particular point of time, or how it evolves. But I think there is now a fundamental shift in the way even the question of nationhood is being viewed by the Congress party, and it's surprising that there is this kind of right liberal faction of Congress party that would always portray, let's look at Punjab, where we have this very purposeful, patriotic CM who comes from an army background, and that used to be their national security credentials vis-a-vis BJP, right? Actually, they seem to have completely given up on that one, like by the way in which Amrinder Singh was thrown away, and now, even as public humiliation that he apparently refused to, which I think is completely untrue. I don't think so. I mean, Amrinder had certain qualities, but I would not think that he would have lost power over refusing not to give farmers free power or something like that. So that kind of repeated humiliation of a very senior leader, I think we need to really watch the space. Is my sense actually.
Yeah. No, a couple of quick points based on what you said. One is that I think the Congress party has crossed that line that you mentioned sometime back itself, right? In terms of the sovereignty of the nation and so on, right? I mean, look at the recent, like whatever, their reaction to the Singapore Prime Minister's remarks, as we discussed as well, right? I mean, finding alliances and, people to make your points outside of India. I mean, that's just, that's just crazy. And also, I mean, do check out the episode we did on Punjab sometime back, maybe a couple of months back with Rohit, a very comprehensive deep dive on, the various factors influencing the politics of the state. And also, I mean, we discussed this yesterday with Rohit as well on the live stream. So both of these episodes should be of interest. Moving on. The Delhi High Court on Friday passed an order restraining historians from publishing defamatory content against the historian Vikram Sampath. Historians Audrey Trushke, Ananya Chakravarti, and Rohit Chopra wrote a letter to the Royal Historical Society raising allegations of plagiarism against Vikram Sampath with respect to his biography of Veer Savarkar. Justice Amit Bansal noted that the continued publication of the said letter has been causing considerable damage to Dr. Sampath's reputation and career. The suit also refers to some alleged defamatory tweets made by Abhishek Bakshi and Ashok Swain. The suit seeks damage of rupees 2 crore from the said defendants. Now, we did a recent episode with Dr. Sampath as well. It was, an amazing episode where he did cover some of these points on, who constitutes a historian and who are these people who kind of give these certificates and so on. So, you can hear it from him directly. But Prasanna, I mean, it's good to see that we're also fighting back, right? I mean, I think it's good to see that, the suit has been filed and there's some cost to, doing these ridiculous things.
Yeah, I think, there is this Sampath's book on Savarkar, with the cat on the pigeons, right? Like it was a masterly, scholarly work with such copious reference, and it was a formidable work of scholarship, right? Like, and I don't think so it's been adequately countered or challenged in a scholastic way so far, actually. So obviously there is this campaign of calumny and kind of a malicious campaign that has been launched against him, which kind of attempts to undermine the enormous work of scholarship in these kind of through this malicious campaign. It's good that basically one of the constant refrain of this left-wing ecosystem was that you fight ideas with ideas, you fight books with books, and obviously that doesn't clearly seem to be the case here, where they've kind of resorted to this level of malicious disinformation. I think it's good that he's taking the legal route, but I mean, it's good signaling, and it's good signaling, and it's very important that the left ecosystem also once in a while gets this clear signal that they can't just get away with this kind of malicious campaign. And I hope that there are people within that ecosystem who introspect and really look at I think huge decline in the quality of scholarship also from them, especially I think like till the Marxist ideology was dominant, and when USSR had that kind of apparatus and institutional capability to influence academics and through various means and ways, I think the left had a certain ability to produce scholarship, though it is always based on certain framework and theories which were developed elsewhere. But I think in the post-90s, right, like as we became a unipolar world and now a multilateral world, and this entire technology disruption, digital disruption, the economic models, actually, this entire thing of left socialism versus right capitalism, all those kind of binaries have collapsed, right? They just don't seem to have any intellectual tools to handle this kind of collapse of these binaries, as I would put it, actually. So basically, I think they've just gone berserk.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, also do check out the episode with Dr. Vikram Sampath. It was a really fascinating and very, very comprehensive episode as well. Right, moving on. In some global news, tensions are escalating in the Russia-Ukraine issue, with 2 soldiers being killed in a shelling attack. Full military mobilization was ordered on Saturday by separatist leaders in eastern Ukraine. US Vice President Kamala Harris said on Saturday that the world has arrived at, to quote, a decisive moment in history. She also added that the US and its allies will impose significant and unprecedented economic costs. EU nations have asked their citizens to leave Ukraine amid strong fears over the possible Russian invasion. Abhishek, we covered a bit of this last week as well. But we've seen some remarks from the US, both the vice president and the president as well, right?
Yeah, so I guess this will be a recurring topic for some time to come, right, for our weeklies. But over this last week, so President Biden was making some remarks from the White House where he was asked, so whether he thinks that, or what does he think about Russia's actions to come? And he said he believes Putin has made the decision to attack. Like he totally believes that an attack is imminent. And regarding Kamala Harris, I think she was attending a security conference in Munich where various leaders from various countries have assembled to discuss this issue. And so obviously the word going out is that they are still trying to do diplomacy with Russia, and heavy sanctions will be imposed. I think overnight an interesting statement has come from the Ukrainian leader where he said that basically uh, countries need to tell beforehand what the sanctions will be. You cannot just say that you will impose sanctions when Russia attacks. You need to tell exactly what those sanctions will be. And so I thought that kind of made a lot of sense, right? Rather than sort of empty threats, the countries who are opposing Russia, like the US, UK, or the EU countries, they should probably list out exactly what repercussions will be. I think I also read that there are plans for personal sanctions against Putin, right, and not just at the country level, but also at the leader level. So I think the situation continues to remain pretty precarious there, and yeah, I guess for India, uh, it continues to be wait and watch. I think I was just reading some interesting remarks made by the foreign minister on these surrounding issues to some think tank, right, where they were questioned on, he was questioned on things like uh, the West is supporting India on China, so why isn't India taking a stand which is pro-West in this, Russia-Ukraine issue? So he quite explained it really well as to the differences in the situation and the differences in which the various things affect India. So yeah, interesting times right now.
A couple of interesting comments on YouTube. So Tej Choksi says, if Putin takes action, wonder how the India-Russia relationship will evolve, particularly with sensitive technologies like nuclear submarines, where India needs help and the West is less forthcoming. Any comments?
So I think the India-Russia relationship is also sort of undergoing certain strain, right? So as over the last few years, Russia has gone quite close to China, and also recently, I think, invited Imran Khan over. So I guess Russia does also see that India is in a bit of a tight situation with regard to the various balancing acts that India has to make. So yeah, I think the India-Russia relationship is pretty. I would say, I mean, it's pretty sensitive right now. So India has to play its cards pretty carefully, because ultimately, as a country, we are reliant on both US and Russia to certain extent, right, for our defense needs. So that sort of balancing act and playing it very carefully will continue for India.
Yeah, it's funny how this whole non-aligned sort of a movement is coming back, right? I mean, in some sense, and we're going to discuss that when we talk about Nepal adopting UPI as well. And this is a point that Balaji Srinivasan often makes, right? So, so for India to become like the third option in some sense. Nepal will soon become the first country to deploy UPI. NPCI International Payments Limited has joined hands with Gateway Payments Service and Manam Infotech to provide the service in Nepal. GPS is the authorized payment system operator in Nepal, and Manam Infotech will deploy unified payments interface in that country. The NPCI stated that the technology will play a pivotal role in transforming the digital economy of the neighboring country. Well, Nirav, this is really significant, right? I mean, yeah.
So absolutely. So one is, see, India has built a very good tech stack, right from UPI as well as. So this is the first kind of export of our own tech stack. We've had great technology like either like say for Aadhaar or Arogya Setu or all our DigiLocker for all our digital things, right? So I think now you see that other countries are recognizing it. Nepal being like a friendly neighbor and a much smaller size country, much smaller economy. But Nepal has a lot of Nepali citizens who are working in India, right? Because of our treaty where there is free movement of labor. So what this allows first is just like UPI where any one of you all can transfer money to each other directly from your bank account using your phone. This allows some cross-border payments between say India and Nepal. There's a lot of trade, etc. also which happens, but so this is one part. Second is for using this technology, Nepali citizens, Nepali residents can transfer Nepalese rupee between two people themselves, right? So this is recognition of the tech stack which India has developed. There is also in the pipeline something with Bhutan, something with Singapore as well. So Singapore has these other payment apps called PayNow and PayLah. They are probably talking of integration with India's UPI. So for example, me sitting in Singapore, I can transfer money to my parents digitally seamlessly. Whereas right now, if I do a bank transfer, it takes 2 days, right? So I think this is a big recognition for India's tech achievements. Hopefully, this is first of many to come. So I think India can help a lot of other developing countries. What has happened is a lot of the developing countries in parts of Asia, as well as Africa or like Latin America, they only look at like say US or like China or like Russia for their tech requirements, right? Now India is a significant player, and this goes on to say that there is a lot more trust in our systems, as well as like so trust even from like a data security standpoint, and not being like being more of an ally rather than a potential enemy, and also trust in the form of that the technology delivers. So I think both these sides, India has done well. Hopefully, this is first of many. I think this is like a nice, you could say like a test version, and we roll this out in many more countries.
I think there was some kind of protocol on remittances from Singapore as well, right? I mean, a few months back. Yeah.
So that's
no,
what I think being talked about. That's next in the pipeline. It is there.
No, I think remittances are a big use case on this front, and there's a piece by Balaji Srinivasan on why India stack should be made global and how we should add crypto onto it and stuff. And one of the things that he talks about is evolving neutral protocols, right? So offer countries like an alternate so that they're not beholden to either American or kind of Chinese corporates, basically, right? And they can have more locally operated tech platforms and national digital currencies and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's definitely a good article if you want to check out the future and global potential of the UPI stack, right? India
also,
stack rather.
Just making another point.
Yeah.
Say for example, today Visa and MasterCard, they charge quite exorbitantly for basically making a ledger transfer, right? And especially when it is cross-border, also there is the aspect of what exchange rate are you hit at, etc. Right? So I think they have a fantastic backbone, a fantastic piece of infrastructure, but they charge maybe too much for it versus what UPI, which is basically free for Indians domestically. So I think this is creating like another. Similarly, in China, you have Alipay and WeChat Pay, etc. Right? You have their payment apps. So I think this is another competitive player which has come into place, and the recognition that we are getting, that's great.
Yeah, for sure. I would definitely agree on all of those things. Well, that's a wrap from us here on Bharatvaarta Weekly. This was a short, crisp, weekly compared to the previous couple of ones. And Next week, we have a very interesting podcast, a very comprehensive discussion on India and West Asia relations. I spoke to Dr. Alvite Ningtojom, who teaches at the Symbiosis Institute of International Studies, and he's an expert on West Asia. We spoke about plenty of things. I mean, there was the UAE trade agreement that was recently signed a couple of days back as well. Spoke about national security and some of the naval cooperation in the Indian Ocean and plenty of other things, right? So definitely a very interesting podcast on geopolitics. Do check it out. Well, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Let us know on social media what you think about the content that we put out, and we'll see you next week. Thank you so much.